So, as we head into our penultimate day, we find ourselves back in Oyama's office, where it seems that Oyama was able to gather a little bit of important information regarding the Ikuta residence from the local police. Namely the fact that there was a pretty grisly murder that occurred there 4 years ago, involving Mr. Akuta's wife, Tomoko. Now, granted, this would have been nice to know ahead of time, but considering the horrible visions we had in the previous chapter, most of this information is stuff we already know, including the fact that the third member of the family, his daughter Asahi, was able to escape the wrath of the killer, who was never caught, but considering what we saw in the previous chapter, we do know at this point to be Yutani. Problem is, namely the fact that we have no idea why Yutani did it. Yutani being dead pretty much prevents us from questioning him, and we can't really go to the police with these dream visions as evidence, so kind of hit a dead end there. But we haven't reached a dead end yet in trying to figure out just what's going on with this cursed business and the cursed game. Namely, that document, that book, that diary that Mr. Ikuta was holding in the closet is going to be our key piece of information here. And that is a diary from his daughter, Asahi. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that, though I do apologize, just a problem with the game, but there's nothing I can do about the left page there. We will get to see these drawings later on, but namely this shows an initial very happy young girl. They've gone on vacation to the Cape Side Hotel and had a great time. But as we start flipping through these blank pages, we find near the end a very grisly and grim diary entry, namely involving the mother's death and just Asahi's hatred towards her father and his job. Now, while that doesn't seem like a whole lot of information, it does shed a lot of light in regards to just where a horrible curse involving torment and anger could have come from. Now, another possible problem right now is the fact that after Tomoko's death, Asahi was very, very unhappy with her father, to the point where she ran away from home. And for some reason, Mr. Ikuta never did report it to the police. So as of right now, no one is very sure about where Asahi is. But if we use the assumption that she might have gone to her last happy, pleasant memory, it could very well be that Cape Side Hotel that was mentioned in the diary. Also, we find here, oddly enough, that Oyama seems to think that maybe it's the mother's tortured spirit doing things, but that doesn't really match up with what we've seen so far. Either way, our next destination is going to be the Capes mentioned in the diary. So we are going to go on a lovely vacation, though Oyama's not going to be joining us immediately. He seems to want to go check something out in Odaka's apartment one more time. Also, he mentions the fact that there is a page missing at the very end of her diary. Maybe we can find that as we head to the Capes. Now, what you might notice immediately is the fact that we are not at the Capes. For some reason or another, we are dropped off seemingly in the middle of nowhere. And I have a few ideas about what this might be, but we'll keep that in mind as we press forward. First, though, we do have an email from Oyama. Though it seems a bit superfluous, it doesn't really have too much information, just more postulation regarding why Mr. Ikuda might be in such a catatonic state. Just his game was canceled, his wife dies, just things went to shit for him. Let's quote Shakespeare. Which I'm fairly certain was just something added in the fan translation. I don't think that was in the original game. But yeah, a part of why I think we might have been dumped off seemingly in the middle of nowhere, this is just assumption, is the fact that things are not totally on the up and up with this location that we are going to. I get the impression that maybe Davey took a taxi and the taxi driver was not willing to press forward all the way to the hotel. But as with most locations we've headed to in the game, this one is going to have sinister undertones. And here's our first sinister undertone. Now, as we get closer, this is a regret we haven't seen in quite some time, since I think Chapter 2, but it's our former colleague, Odaka. As you can probably guess, Odaka is not friendly at this point. And in fact, he is a very, very fast regret. So for the most part, in this tunnel section, just press forward as quickly as you can. Honestly, if you have not gotten down the running at this point, you might be in a bit of trouble. Because if we happen to take a little quick look back, which I'll do in just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, he is hauling ass. Even though it may not seem like it, you have to realize we've been running this entire time. So, in comparison to some of the regrets we've seen so far, he is much, much quicker. Possibly driven by just maybe the closeness he has to us in regards to his torment. Quickly enough, though, as we exit the tunnel, Odaka quickly disappears. And we get something of a reprieve where we can just soak in this lovely exterior. One of the few that we get in the game. And it is good to know that there is public transportation around here, but Rico seems to have expected us on our journey. Also, she may be a big deterrent as to the public transportation here, so we're just gonna ignore her because she is just as fast as Odaka. But in the distance, is that someone else in the game? Someone that's not a horrible, horrible ghost? It could be able to help us. But as we draw closer, we find what apparently is a very common sight in Japan, which are these bizarre warning mannequins. And sadly, we're going to have to take a little alternate route, considering that for some reason the road is just completely blocked. And just for the mere sake of convenience, there's this mysterious pathway that I'm sure is heading directly to where we need to go, and well, we can take another breather here because for some reason I don't know if Rico has pathing problems or she's just supposed to stop following me at this point, but yeah, she is no longer following us, which means we can take in these interesting statues here lining the path. Now, my assumption is that these are what I think are called Jizo statues, or Jizzo. I think it's Jizo. But first, got a new email. So yeah, this is a first. It seems that Oyama is actually going to be joining us on our journey, though he is running a little bit late. But yeah, as I was mentioning before, these Jizo statues are from what I've been able to gather, supposed to be possibly a saint for deceased children, which I think would fit pretty well into the plot. Also, though you may be concerned that Riko is trying to head us off of the pass, as it were, she, weirdly enough, just completely disappears. I suppose that's to keep you motivated to running forward, but, you know, we're on vacation, we should take in the sights. And what lovely sights they are. As it seems like we're getting further and further off the beaten path, there are still signals that we could possibly be heading in the right direction. I don't assume that most of the vacationers went this direction, but I think we're very special guests in this case. And that is not just a jump scare. That man will kill you. It was quite surprising the first time I was running through this area and he happened to fall down, because I was assuming he was just another jump scare, but in reality, he is a horrible danger that will try to deter you from running forward. And in fact, this portion of the game is somewhat odd in its pacing and just why it's even in the game. It's an unnecessarily large amount of running, perhaps just to show off all the different running sound effects they had in the game. Who knows? And we could visit the lighthouse right now, but Odaka seems to be against our sightseeing. Instead, our main destination is still that Capeside Hotel, and we are just almost there after our very long, regret-filled, arduous journey. But yeah, Oyama yet again managed to neglect some important information, such as the fact that the Capeside has been shut down for quite some time. It's in a state of massive disrepair and, as you might have guessed, is filled to the brim with regrets. This place is especially dangerous for a number of reasons, one of which we have very, very limited visibility. Obviously, there's no electricity in this abandoned hotel, and we are forced to resort to using our flashlight, which I finally managed to get working, so we get the full effect going on here. Also, like I said, this place is just filled to the brim with regrets, and they show up in some of the most difficult places to deal with, especially if you don't know ahead of time. Such as in here. Now, you might have saw it from the corner of my eye there, but there is a regret that spawns immediately in here and will grab you if you don't start moving. Also, among these very long corridors, there is a very large chance that there will just be a regret waiting to grab you, so for the most part, I am just going to be going on a very straight path to where we need to go in here. which from what that sign seemed to say is going to take us through what I think is the men's shower. Now, as with most of the other parts of the game, most of these regrets will go on a very set patrol, so you can watch them and see just where they go. But in case you have been just stressed out and worried, you can always take a lovely dip in the bathroom of the Cape Side Hotel here. Though, as one can imagine, we might be a little bit pressed on time and don't really have time to relax. Also, you can hear a regret somewhere. It might be the one in the previous room, but don't go rushing forward because there is a little bit of a trick to this one. That's right. That lady in red is going to come slowly walking towards you down this narrow hallway here, and if you don't wait for her in that room, she will very likely just grab you and kill you. Also, though it's not really audible to hear, there is a regret slowly coming down the hallway here, and yeah, we're gonna have to duck in here. Though that also seems like a proverbial and literal dead end. So maybe the regret has left, though we are now barred from exiting the room. And this is one of many tricky situations that this area presents. You just have to edge forward ever so slightly. And as our impending doom is here, what better time to get a game update? Now, at this point, the pretext that we are playing a game has kind of gone completely off the rails. To the point where we have a brand new NPC, and it's a multiplayer co-op game now with our Professor Oyama. Yeah, at this point, there have been a few hints dropped throughout the game that Oyama has indeed been in possession of a haunted TS from the start, honestly. You may recall during the hospital chapter when we were looking at the different IPs that the third TS just happened to have his other name, though it could be easily overlooked. Still, Oyama seems extremely happy to be in this horrible situation and states that there's no greater happiness for a researcher than to be knee-deep in their studies, but we'll leave him to that. For now, we need to figure out just what we need to do here, which is namely staying away from these glitched-out figures. If we get near any of them, much like in the marriage chapter if the bride caught us, well, there's not a massive penalty, but we are sent back to the start of this little dodging situation. Still, it's not terribly difficult. You just have to keep in mind how large your player character is. Namely, what will give you the largest trouble is this little glitched out figure here. If you just try to rush towards the door, you're probably going to be caught as you open it, so it's easy enough to do it that way, but before we talk to the figure on the floor there, we do find our final item hidden away in the bell. And if we talk to this figure, we'll find, interestingly enough, that it doesn't want anything to do with us. Still, it managed to drive away that ghost. Though we are still blocked from exiting the room that way. But as with most of the other situations we've run into in the game world, there is some overlap between the real world and the game world. Namely, where we found that body laying on the floor is invariably the destination we're going to have to look for in the hotel here. And if we needed some indication that Asahi might be somewhere in here, we do start to slowly find some of her doodles just laying around, sketched on the walls. But yeah, for the most part, the game has been pretty good with giving us hints and indications as to just where we need to go in the real world. In this case, most of those smaller rooms we saw off to the side didn't have anything for us. And in regards to the hotel, they're mostly locked or broken. There are a few we can enter, but outside of a few doodles or a few regrets, we just need to stay away from them. Though in this case, we could sneak by this regret and get to that door on the left. The problem is, if you wait for too long, he will slowly start to come at you. The good news is that like I said, there are a few rooms you can get into. This one is good as a little bit of a sanctuary to get rid of that regret in the hallway. But I think more than anything, we're not wanting to look for a single small room. Instead, we possibly are wanting to look for a chapel or just some larger room, maybe a banquet hall. Could be what these double doors here are for. Instead, though, it's just a party that we don't want to be a part of. There are two regrets that are on a pretty tight patrol in here, but as long as you hug the far wall here, you can easily get around. I do not recommend going down the center of the room. There's a lot of stuff to get caught up on. I do get a feeling, though, that these regrets are somewhat indicative that we are on the right path. I'm just unsure of what we're supposed to do here. Because we seem to be a little trapped. I mean, there are a few doors we ran past, but I think we don't have time to check them. Though, yet again, it's just a puzzle of waiting and seeing what happens. As we find ourselves in another banquet hall, see that someone has left behind some lit candles to light our way. And is that Asahi? But yeah, if there was any question whether or not Asahi was still alive or not, pretty clearly at this point we know her to be dead. And that quite possibly that glitched out figure that we've been seeing is pretty much her. Still, she is a bit confused as to why we've gone through all this trouble to find her. Even after she admits to trying to kill us, we still have gone out of our way to find her. Could it be that we care for her? It's clearly not the case. We are mostly in this for the very selfish reason of not wanting to die, but maybe we can convince her spirit to let go. You know, games are bad, sure. And maybe it's bad the fact that her dad never tried to come find her, but all that matters is that we've come to find her, we've come to rest her spirit. Everything should be fine now. know you've waited a long time, Asahi, but it is time to go. And just like that, her spirit seems to be gone. Nothing, no regrets waiting to catch us, nothing like that. Just, I think we've done it. I mean, that has to be it. I don't know what other solution there could be. Maybe it could be his wife that we still need to free, but I mean, we've seen nothing of her throughout the game, which would be very odd if that was the case. Maybe, oh, it's the last diary entry. Maybe that will shed some more light on things. Though it just seems to be more wishful thinking on the part of Asahi. Still, I get an overwhelming sense of serenity. I really think that we've solved this whole curse thing. I'm sure the sun will come up tomorrow, and we'll live a very long, happy life. Also, an interesting piece of information. The name Asahi in Japanese means sunrise. Also, the name Akuta means ocean. Put them together, and you've got the sunrise on the ocean. Seems to go along pretty well with one of Asahi's happiest memories. But that does remind me, especially now that we've gotten this email, that Oyama is waiting for us. He should be here pretty soon. He is running a little bit late, but he is going to meet us down by the road. We can give him just the good news that the curse is done. I'm sure he'll be ecstatic, not only for himself, but for us, because neither one of us will die. And as if we needed another update, Oyama has gotten a little bit closer. I guess he's not going to be waiting by the road anymore. He's now made his way over to the tunnel. I guess he reached that road blockade we ran into before. being really insistent with these emails. I mean, we're almost there, and why is he going on about being cold? Either way, we're almost there. We can give him the good information. And I mean, looking at it, it's almost the end. It's almost the final day for us as well. There's only 5 minutes left, so we barely make it. Or we didn't make it at all. Something is still very wrong. So, freeing Asahi's spirit, apparently not the answer. Maybe we needed to do something with Tomoko, but as we find ourselves in this final RPG section for this day, we find that if we talk to some of these NPCs I didn't talk to before, we don't find Tomoka as an NPC. Instead, we still find Asahi. And we find that, almost in a similar fashion as the ending of Ringu, that just freeing her spirit was not enough. What really might... Well, at this point we have no real idea what we're supposed to do here. We are dealing with just an unreasonable, tormented, hate-filled spirit. And as we continue to talk to more and more of these NPCs, which we have to for this particular section, we find that she can never forgive her father for abandoning her, for causing the death of her mother due to the negligence with focusing on this stupid, useless game. There's just no reasoning with Asahi at this point. All she cares about is killing anyone that has to do with the game, anybody that touches the game, anybody that might even touch the game system itself. All she cares about is wiping them out. So, what are we supposed to do here? Well, sadly, we're going to have to wait on that. This is one situation in the game where I felt they really could have condensed this down. There could have been less NPCs, and the reason that I didn't talk to these NPCs in the first place is because I knew we were going to have to do this. But also the fact that the NPCs really didn't have anything story-wise to add. They were mostly just very generic, we are trapped, tormented souls. But I don't know if there were possibly other people that have played the game, because what we've seen for the most part is all of her victims are the devs themselves, or Mr. Yutani, or just Riko and Odaka. As far as we know, the game has not been played by anyone else, so I'm not really certain if these are just NPCs made to worry us, or convince us just how futile our efforts are. It's kind of hard to say. In the end, it's really just hammering home the fact of stuff we already know. There's no way on Earth that we are going to be able to reason with Asahi. We are doomed. Which is a pretty common idea in Japanese horror. just no escape. And as we find ourselves back in the real world, we find that we are chased by that funky bass line that we heard so long ago. But this time around, we're not being chased by Rico, we're not being chased by Oyama. Instead, I think that, seriously, we are just being chased by the inevitable racing of the clock, as our final day is looming closer and closer and closer. We have nowhere else left to go. We can't go back into the hotel. We found to just be a dead end. And we now have no one else left to turn to. Just kind of are out of ideas. But out of nowhere, we do have one final email from Oyama. It seems that in the end he knew, quite possibly, that his end was coming, and he wanted to give us one final clue, and it had to do with that drawing from Odaka's apartment that we saw earlier. Now, in case you did forget, the game is nice enough to have a bit of reflection time for us. But near Odaka's drenched dead body, we did see an interesting picture of a lighthouse. Now, at the time, it didn't mean anything. It was just an odd little drawing, but now that we've gotten further in the game, we do see that there is a correlation between the lighthouse from that picture and a lighthouse that we saw in the diary. The Cape Side Hotel is home to a very picturesque lighthouse. And it could very well be that that's where our salvation lies. But we'll have to see that next time as we head into the final day.